On Christmas Eve, in a mansion where every room glittered with gold, a maid opened a door she wasn't supposed to open. What she found inside wasn't wrapped in ribbon or hidden under a tree. It was a man, sitting in the dark, holding a gun, and in that moment, everything she thought she knew about wealth, about happiness, about the man she'd worked for in silence, shattered. This is the story of the Christmas Eve that changed two lives forever. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Catherine Torres had been cleaning houses for 23 years. She was 51 years old, originally from El Salvador, and had lived in the United States since she was 19. She had calloused hands, a bad knee that ached in the winter, and a work ethic that never quit. Catherine wasn't the kind of person who complained. She showed up. She did the job. She went home. For the past 6 years, she'd worked for the same client, a man named Daniel Ashford. If you lived in Connecticut, you knew the name. Ashford Capital, real estate, investments, hotels. The kind of wealth that didn't just buy things, it built empires. Daniel's estate sat on 12 acres in Greenwich, a sprawling stone mansion with 10 bedrooms, a library that smelled like leather and old money, and windows that overlooked a frozen lake. Catherine came 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. She arrived at 8 in the morning, let herself in through the service entrance, and moved through the house like a shadow. She dusted shelves no one had touched. She vacuumed rooms no one entered. She folded towels that would never be used, because Daniel Ashford lived alone. No wife, no children, no guests. Just him and the silence. Catherine had only spoken to him a handful of times in 6 years. He was polite, distant, and always busy. He'd nod when he passed her in the hallway, sometimes say good morning, but that was it. She didn't know much about him, and she didn't ask. That wasn't her job. Her job was to keep the mansion perfect, and she did. But on December 24th, 2019, everything changed. Catherine almost didn't come to work that day. It was Christmas Eve. Her daughter, Sophia, had called the night before, asking if she could come over early to help make tamales, a tradition they'd kept for years. But Catherine needed the money. Her grandson, Miguel, was starting community college in January, and she'd promised to help with books. So she told Sophia she'd be home by noon, pulled on her coat, and drove through the snow to the Ashford estate. When she arrived, the house felt different, quieter, somehow. The lights were on, but the curtains were drawn. The driveway hadn't been plowed. Catherine frowned. Daniel usually had a service come through before dawn. She let herself in, stomping the snow off her boots. The house was warm, but it felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. She called out, as she always did. "Mr. Ashford, it's Catherine. I'm here." No answer. That wasn't unusual. He often worked in his office on the second floor, door closed, phone pressed to his ear. Catherine set down her bag and got to work. She started in the kitchen, wiping down counters that were already spotless, loading a single coffee mug into the dishwasher. She moved to the living room, where a massive Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated by professionals. It was beautiful, perfect, and completely untouched. No presents underneath, no stockings on the mantel, just a tree, glowing in an empty room. Catherine felt a pang of sadness. She thought about her own small apartment, crowded and loud and full of life. She thought about Sophia and Miguel and the tamales they'd make together. And she thought about Daniel Ashford, alone in this giant house, with all the money in the world and no one to share it with. She shook her head and kept cleaning. By 10:30, Catherine had finished the downstairs. She grabbed her vacuum and headed upstairs, moving down the long hallway past framed paintings and closed doors. She paused at Daniel's office. The door was shut, as always. She knocked lightly. "Mr. Ashford, I'm going to vacuum the hallway. Just wanted to let you know." Nothing. She waited a moment, then moved on. But as she passed the last door at the end of the hall, she noticed something. It was cracked open, just slightly. Catherine had cleaned this house for 6 years, And that door had never been open. Not once. She hesitated. It wasn't her business. She should just keep walking. But something pulled at her. A feeling she couldn't name. She stepped closer, her heartbeat picking up. "Mr. Ashford?" she called softly. No response. She pushed the door open a few inches, peering inside. It was dark. The curtains were drawn, but she could make out the shape of a man, sitting in a chair by the window, and in his hand, resting on his lap, was a gun. Catherine's breath caught. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't think. Then, quietly, she said his name. Mr. Ashford. He didn't turn, didn't move. His voice, when it came, was flat, empty. "You should go, Catherine." She stepped into the room, her hands trembling. "What are you doing?" "I'm tired." "Sir, please, put the gun down." He let out a short, hollow laugh. "Why? What difference does it make?" Catherine's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She didn't know what to say. She wasn't trained for this. She was just a maid. But she was also a mother, a grandmother, a woman who had seen pain before. And she knew, in that moment, that if she walked away, Daniel Ashford would not be alive by the time she came back. So she stayed. She took a slow step forward, her voice steady, despite the fear racing through her. "It makes a difference to me." He finally turned his head, looking at her for the first time. His eyes were red. His face was gaunt. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. "You don't even know me," he said. "I know enough," Catherine said. "I know you drink your coffee black. I know you read the same book 3 times because I keep seeing it on your desk. I know you listen to jazz on Sunday mornings. I know you're alone. And I know that whatever you're feeling right now, it won't last forever." Daniel stared at her. And then, slowly, his face crumpled. The gun slipped from his hand onto the floor, and he started to cry. "If this moment is hitting you, I need to know. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever felt completely alone, even when surrounded by everything? Let's talk about it. And if someone you know might need to hear this story, share it. You never know who's struggling in silence." Catherine didn't touch the gun. She didn't call the police. She just sat down on the floor across from him, her bad knee protesting, and she waited. After a long silence, Daniel began to talk. He told her things he'd never told anyone. He told her about his wife, Lauren, who had died 3 years ago from cancer. About how he'd poured himself into work to avoid the grief, built his company bigger and bigger, thinking that success would fill the hole she left behind. But it didn't. He told her about his daughter, Emma, who was 32 and lived in California. They hadn't spoken in over a year, not because of a fight, just because they drifted. Because he didn't know how to talk to her anymore, because every time he tried, he felt like a stranger. He told her about the board meeting 2 weeks ago, where his own company, the empire he'd built from nothing, had voted him out. They said he was too old, too out of touch. They gave him a golden parachute and a handshake and told him to enjoy his retirement. And he came home to this empty house with all his money and all his accomplishments and realized he had nothing, no purpose, no family, no reason to wake up in the morning. "I thought about it every day," he said quietly. "And today, on Christmas Eve, I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't pretend I was okay." Catherine listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer platitudes. She just listened. And when he was done, she spoke. "You know what I see when I come here?" she said. "I see a man who still makes his bed every morning, who still puts his coffee mug in the sink, who still leaves a light on in the hallway, even though no one's coming home. You're not ready to give up, Mr. Ashford. You're just ready to stop pretending." Daniel looked at her, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or just exhaustion. "What do I do?" he asked. Catherine thought for a moment. "You call your daughter." Daniel didn't want to. He told Catherine that Emma wouldn't answer, that she was busy with her own life, that he'd already missed too much. But Catherine didn't budge. "You call her," she said firmly. "Right now." So he did. With shaking hands, Daniel picked up his phone and dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Catherine held her breath, And then, a voice. "Dad?" Emma sounded surprised. Cautious, but not angry. Daniel's voice cracked. "Hi, sweetheart." There was a pause. "Are you okay?" "No," he said. "I'm not, but I want to be." And then he told her everything. About the company, about the loneliness, about how much he missed her, about how sorry he was for all the years he'd let slip away. Emma cried. Daniel cried. And Catherine, sitting on the floor of that dark room, cried too. By the end of the call, Emma had booked a flight. She'd be there by tomorrow morning, Christmas Day. Daniel hung up and looked at Catherine, his face raw but lighter. "Thank you," he whispered. Catherine shook her head. "You did this, not me." But they both knew that wasn't true. If she hadn't walked through that door, if she hadn't stayed, if she hadn't cared enough to see him as more than just the man who signed her paycheck, Daniel Ashford would be dead. Instead, he was alive, and for the first time in years, he had something to look forward to. Catherine left the Ashford estate just after noon. Before she went, Daniel stopped her at the door. "Catherine, I don't know how to repay you," she smiled. "You don't need to. Please, let me do something." She hesitated, then said, "My grandson's starting college in January. If you want to help, help him." Daniel nodded. "Done. Tuition, books, all of it." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Ashford, that's too much." "No," he said. "It's not nearly enough." They stood there for a moment, two people from completely different worlds, connected by a single act of compassion. And then Catherine went home. She walked into her small apartment, where Sophia was already rolling dough, where Miguel was arguing with his little sister about what movie to watch, where the smell of spices and laughter filled every corner. And she thought about Daniel, alone in his big house, waiting for his daughter. She hoped he'd be okay. The next morning, Christmas Day, Emma Ashford walked into her father's house for the first time in over a year. She found him in the kitchen, trying to make coffee, looking older and more fragile than she remembered. They hugged, they cried, they talked for hours, and slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild. Over the following months, Daniel started therapy. He reconnected with old friends. He started volunteering at a local shelter. He even got a dog, a golden retriever he named Charlie, and every week, without fail, he called Emma. As for Catherine, she kept cleaning houses. But now, every time she walked into the Ashford estate, Daniel was there to greet her, not as a boss, as a friend. He asked about Sophia, about Miguel, about her life. And one Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year later, he invited her and her whole family to his house for dinner. They came, they laughed, they shared tamales and stories and warmth. And in that big, once empty mansion, there was finally life. This story is based on real events, though names and details have been changed to protect privacy. It's a reminder that money can't buy the things that matter most: connection, purpose, someone who cares enough to stay when it would be easier to walk away. Daniel Ashford had everything the world said he should want, but he didn't have a reason to live. Until a maid named Catherine Torres gave him one. Not with grand gestures or speeches, just by seeing him, by listening, by refusing to let him disappear. If you're watching this and you're struggling, please know this: you matter. Your life has value. And some people care, even if you can't see them right now. Reach out. Call someone. Even if it feels impossible, it's not too late. And if you know someone who's hurting, don't wait. Don't assume they're fine. Check on them. Listen. Stay. You might just save a life. Before you go, I want to ask you something. If you were in Catherine's position, would you have walked into that room? And if you were Daniel, do you think you'd have had the courage to make that call? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story touched you, please share it. Someone out there needs to hear it. Thank you for being here. Merry Christmas. And remember, the greatest gift you can give someone is your presence, your time, and your willingness to care. See you in the next video.